Welcome to the OR's virtual career development session, Strategies for Finding Your Faculty Job During COVID-19 and Beyond. Today's session was organized with input and feedback from the ORS New Investigator Mentoring Committee and specifically by NIMC members Blaine Christensen and Fanny Sylvia Q. I am pleased to introduce today's session organizers, Blaine Christensen and Fanny Sylvia Q. Dr. Christensen is currently an associate professor in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at the University of California, Davis, and also chair of the Biomedical Engineering Graduate Group at UC Davis. His research interests include pathophysiology of post-traumatic osteoarthritis and systemic skeletal effects of bone fractures and other acute injuries. Dr. Q is currently a postdoctoral fellow with Dr. Farshid Gulick in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at Washington University in St. Louis. Her research interests include musculoskeletal tissue regeneration, especially with respect to limbs and joints in both human and veterinary medicine. At this time, I am pleased to present Dr. Blaine Christensen.
Great, thank you, Sherry, and thank you to my co-organizer and the speakers for their help and commitment to this virtual career development session. I first want to talk about the faculty hiring survey that we sent out a few months ago. The survey was sent to the research directors of 31 of the top NIH-funded orthopedic surgery departments, and also to 34 department chairs from top-ranked biomedical engineering departments. There was 4 questions to the survey. The first question was, are you planning to hire new faculty within the next 12 months, or in the case of orthopedic surgery departments, new research faculty? The second question was, if you are planning to hire new faculty, what career stage are you targeting? So early career, mid-career, or senior, or any of the above. The third question was, for those who are not planning to hire, were you planning to hire prior to the COVID-19 shutdown and economic decline? And the fourth question was, what cost-saving measures has your university put in place that could affect hiring? So I received responses from 23 out of the 31 orthopedic surgery departments, and also 21 out of the 34 BME departments. So it was a very high response rate. So these are the results from the first question. Does your department plan to hire any new faculty in the next 12 months? As you can see, there's some meaningful differences between orthopedic surgery and BME departments. For orthopedic surgery, about half of them said no, but 7 departments said yes, and 5 were unsure. For biomedical engineering, there was a lot more uncertainty. Over half of them were unsure whether they were hiring or not, but 4 of them did say yes, and 5 said no. So for the ones that said yes, they are planning to hire, this is the career stage they anticipate hiring. Again, you can see some differences between orthopedic surgery and biomedical engineering. So orthopedic surgery departments were vastly, by and large, looking to hire mid-career or early career faculty. There was a couple that were looking at senior or any stage, whereas in biomedical engineering, they were much more likely to be targeting any career stage, or in particular early career, and mid-career and senior were much less likely to be targeted. So third, this is the one that's really heartbreaking. For the departments that are not hiring, did your department plan to hire faculty in the next 12 months prior to the COVID-19 pandemic and economic downturn? You can see here, there was a lot of jobs that were out there that are no longer going to be out there this year. So in orthopedic surgery, 9 departments said they were planning to hire prior to the shutdown. And in biomedical engineering, most of them, so 10, were planning to hire, and the other 2 were unsure. And finally, has your university instituted any cost-saving measures such as hiring freezes, salary freezes, et cetera? On the y-axis is the number of respondent departments that say they have these in place. So you can see both in orthopedic surgery and biomedical engineering, there is a lot of cost-saving measures in place. The 2 most common were hiring freezes and salary freezes, but there were also furloughs as well as retirement contribution cuts, salary cuts, and then even staff furloughs, hiring freezes, and even layoffs in some situations. So those are the results of the survey. At this time, I'd like to hand the session over to my co-organizer to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Blaine. So I'm delighted to present our first speaker, Dr. Marjolein Vandermeulen. Dr. Vandermeulen is the James and Marsha McCormick Director and Swanson Professor of Biomedical Engineering at Cornell University. She has served in many leadership and service roles, both at Cornell and in the broader engineering and orthopedic communities, working actively to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in these fields. Dr. Vandermeulen will speak about the faculty hiring process for the upcoming cycle from her perspective of a department chair. I'm also pleased to introduce Dr. Chaolong Wu as our second speaker. Dr. Wu is an assistant professor of orthopedics and rehabilitation at the University of Rochester, where he started this fall. And prior to Rochester, he was a research instructor and postdoctoral scholar with Dr. Farsh Gilak at Washington University in St. Louis in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. Dr. Wu will share his personal experience navigating the faculty job search in 2019 to 2020. And with that, let's get started. Please take it away, Dr. Vandermeulen.
I participated in the Strategic Oversight Committee, actually the development of the committee, and then I've served on it. And then more recently, as chair of biomedical engineering, I've been in charge sort of searches, and the chair does does all the negotiating and the hiring, the offers. And so in that capacity, I've hired quite a few faculty. So this is sort of the context for where my experience comes from in today's discussion. So I assume that many of you are on the call because you want to understand the process, and so my job here is to go through the process and highlight some of the key components of it. So when we decide that we need a faculty member, we start by forming a search committee, and then we, in parallel, often post an ad, and that ad has a deadline. And to that deadline, we often get as many as 200 applications for one job. So as you think about this process, keep in mind what the numbers look like, but then I'll try to explain a little bit of what happens, how we get these numbers down to end up with one candidate ultimately, or one offer. So we go from an ad to taking the pool down to some sort of a video interview, and that interview allows us to do more of them and more screening of individuals. And so that's usually around 20 people, I would say. It probably varies, 10 to 20, let's say. And from that, we develop a short list, which is the set of individuals who come to campus. And that then is somewhere between 3 to 5. Generally, it can vary some, but again, each step is getting down to a smaller and smaller pool. And then ultimately, we come down to our top individuals from those visits, where we offer and negotiate and hopefully hire someone. So starting with this ad and deadline that has this deadline, which is usually in the fall for engineering departments, but can be quite variable, I think, for orthopedic departments. What's in this application? So there's a cover letter. The cover letter really is your statement of interest in the job. So it's a summary of your application and why you're applying, along with your CV, which you should be familiar with and which is sort of a topic in and of itself. And then there's generally up to 3 statements. One, which is your research vision, one on your teaching philosophy, and one on your contributions to diversity. And I'm going to say a little bit about each one of these. We also ask you to submit 3 significant papers. So you're saying of your work, what do you see as the most significant contributions? And then you also give the name of references who are contacted for reference letters. And again, that can vary, but it's generally around a 3, give or take 1 or 2 from that. So this is then what your full application looks like, and this is what goes to the search committee then to look at. So let's talk about what these statements are. I think the most obvious of the 3 perhaps is the research statement. And in that you should talk about your past, present, current, and future research. And with that, you make a case for what you're going to do and where you're going to go. You should indicate within that, as you especially talk about the future, some specifics, including the types of proposals you're going to write and also where you're going to go with them, and to keep in mind there to not only think about federal funding, but to also think about foundations and other sources. But there needs to be some specificity there. Stick to major points and tell a story. Realize I just told you that there's 200 applicants potentially. And so we're reading 200 of these statements. And so make it something that flows and that builds a case as to why you're the right person to hire for what you're doing, and also why what you're doing is important. Again, we have some decisions. Sometimes it's an open area search. Sometimes we're looking for something specific. And so we're reading this statement to see what's this person going to bring to the table? How are you going to fit in? And what are you going to do? And what's your contribution going to be? You also should think about where you're applying with this. And so thinking about why is, in my case, Cornell, a good fit. So are there specific people you might want to work with here? Is there specific expertise on campus? And you also need to think about if there's things like shared equipment, specific facilities that you need, because in some cases, someone could look at a statement and even say, well, you can't do that here. And so why is here a good place for you to do what you want to do? So that's the research statement. Then the second component is your teaching philosophy. And so this should convey your general approach to teaching, including, again, as I said in the title, the philosophy, and then also something around the pedagogy and your teaching, your approach to teaching and why, how you're going to go about, and maybe also why you want to teach. You should also convey what experience you have and maybe give specific examples. And here you can be creative and think not only of formal classroom teaching, think about if you've done outreach workshops. And also part of our teaching mission is teaching students in the lab with research, right? So if you've mentored students, think about what's helped them to be successful. And then the other piece of this teaching statement is also where you see yourself going with teaching. So what are the courses that you would like to teach? You should look at the curriculum for where you're interviewing or where you're applying at this stage, and think about and look at what's being offered now that you can do, and then also think about what you might want to develop. But realize we assume that everybody could develop an elective in their specialty area. So but we're really interested in how can you contribute to our curriculum? What can you do? What's already being taught? So sometimes we have specific needs, but to have someone come in and only focus on the electives that are their specialty area doesn't help our teaching mission as a whole. So that's one of the things that we're addressing with this as well. So that's why looking at the required curriculum and not only electives is quite important also. And then the newest statement on these list of statements, but one that's increasing in its value and its worth in this process, is the statement of your contributions to diversity. So you need to explain how you have or plan to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion through these other components. So through the teaching you're going to do, through research, and also through service. We do a lot of service in our jobs. And so how are you advance this, and how are you going to do this in particular at the institution you're applying to? And here it's a real balance between vision and specifics, because a lot of times you haven't had as many opportunities to do these kind of activities. And so draw on your background and think about how based on what you've been through, you're going to do. So think about proposed initiatives here. This can have more of the future perhaps than some of the other statements do, but at the same time, make sure that what you're proposing is feasible and consistent with your background. So I've seen fantastic ones of these, and you can do a really good job even with limited experience when you draw on your own background and what you've personally experienced and how you want to learn from that and move forward and help others succeed. And so these statements be thoughtful, and actually this applies to all of them. They should all be well written, but this is one that I think is a more recent addition to the process, and people sometimes struggle with it. I want to add one thing, which is we have a rubric that's posted at Cornell, and I've given you the website here, and I'll repeat it again at the end, for how we look at these. It's a suggested way of assessing them, for looking at if someone is weak in their statement, average, or strong, and you might want to look at this. And there's sort of 3 categories that we are advised to think about here, which is just your awareness in general and understanding of these issues in the first place. And so you'd be surprised that some statements don't convey even a basic understanding of diversity issues. Then your experience in promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and then what you propose to do. So again, you can think of this in these 3 categories and make sure that what you propose and submit addresses all 3 of these things. So your understanding, then what you've done, and where you want to go with it. So we get this application now with these statements, with your CV, and with a cover letter and letters of reference. And so now as I told you, there's up to 100 or 200 of these applications. What do we do with it? Well, first of all, we start by sort of triaging the pool to some extent. There's always people in the pool that apply to sort of any search. And so you can start with eliminating people that, maybe don't even have any biomedical engineering experience, for example. And so this elimination often is done that search committee members are assigned portions of the pool, maybe alphabetically, maybe by application numbers, and go through and start by first taking out people that are not viable to begin with. And then from there, we go into the pool and go in and rate the candidates that are viable. And there's usually, it's usually assigned to at least two search committee members read every single application. And then when it gets to making a short list, all committee members have looked at those applications. So again, this is why I said tell a story in your statements, make them interesting, and make sure that you're connecting with your audience, because there's a lot of reading happening here and you want to engage the committee. If the search has a specific focus and area, that will be posted in the ad. And if that's in the ad, we will be reading these applications for that area. So sometimes that's also a filter that's applied to the search committee. And here, as I just said, the statements are quite important for this process. And then the reference letters also really contribute as well. And so making sure that you have references that know you, that know your research, and know your future potential for this. And also, I would recommend very much giving your statements to your reference letter writers so that the letters also can address what you want to do and are a little more informed as well. We've now screened the pool, and now we get down to a list of, let's say, 15 to 20 applicants, and we do these video interviews. So they can be variable in length. In our case, we're generally on the briefer side, because think still about doing 20 of these, think about the prep for one, and your search committee. We generally try to make them very uniform, so there's usually a common set of questions, and the format is the same, so it's the same amount of time. We don't want one applicant to only have 10 minutes and the next applicant to have an hour, right? So the goal is to make these quite uniform so that we're judging people similarly. And it's the search committee. Sometimes it's the full search committee, or it's a subset of the search committee. It can vary. And this is something that if you're being invited to do this, I would ask. You can just ask the person who's inviting you, be it the search committee chair or the department chair, and ask them who's going to be there. The search committee is not secret by any means, and so you can find out who's on the committee. I would do some background reading on them, understand where their perspectives are. But again, the format is going to be pretty common in this. Sometimes the search committee members each have one question that they each ask, and that they ask for every one of these video interviews. Sometimes there's a set of questions that just the chair, whoever's running the meeting leads on. There's a variety of ways of doing that. And the questions here are going to touch on your research experience, your teaching experience, your publications, sort of, and your future directions. So a whole bunch of things. And also, again, the diversity, equity, and inclusion questions are going to come up in your experience there. At the end of the session, you should have time to ask a couple questions, and make sure that you've prepared some, because there's nothing, it doesn't send a very good message to have an interview with a whole search committee sitting there, and then they say, and they ask you, do you have any questions? And you say, no, I'm okay. That doesn't really convey interest. So, part of the evaluation is actually the type of questions the candidate asks in return, in fact, and the degree of interest that you show. Asking no questions shows very little interest in the position, ultimately, when you think about it. So this is a really important thing. And this interview, you're already on a short list, and this is the format for now deciding who goes on to the next round. And so, again, you can ask lots of questions. I would have a discussion with the search committee chair before this. And in that discussion, again, ask on who's going to be in the room, the types of questions, if they won't share the questions. So we actually often share the questions in advance. The questions aren't a secret, and we want as good an answer as possible to those questions. So I would schedule a phone call and talk to that search chair and get more information about it. So then after the video screening interview, we've now hopefully brought the list down to a more manageable number who will normally, in normal times, come to campus to visit. So the on-campus visit is normally a 1 to 2 day format visit. In our case, it includes 2 talks, a research seminar and a chalk talk, and then a whole bunch of meetings with individuals or groups of individuals after that. And if you're doing this in person, there's also dinners and lunches that are sort of social gatherings, but realize that these are still part of the interview process. Sometimes people forget that. And then also you should be able to give some input into this visit yourself in terms of who you would like to visit with, in addition to who the department is scheduling you to visit with. The research seminar is a public talk generally. It's used to look at your past research and also your ability to communicate. So it's a way of assessing how we think someone will be as a teacher, in fact. And generally, this is a mixed audience that includes students and faculty. And students will be predominantly graduate students, but may also be undergrads as well. And so this is, again, something I would ask in prep for this visit. I would ask who comes to these seminars and what's the audience look like. But we're going to be interested in whether an undergrad can sit in the audience and understand, the introduction and the motivation to your research as well in the seminar. So that's the first talk. And we do that usually at the very beginning of the visit because it helps everybody to know what you've done before you start having all these individual meetings. So we try to do this one early. The other talk is your chalk talk, which is your future research vision. And this is really much more of an interactive. It's not a seminar. It's an interactive discussion, I would call it. And the format can vary greatly. And so this is something that you have to ask the search chair or the department chair, whoever you're interacting with on planning your visit, what the format is, who the attendees are, how long it is. So in our case, I say, don't over prepare because you're going to get interrupted and there's going to be lots of discussion. So it's a shorter talk in terms of, and it shouldn't be a repeat of your research seminar. You should assume that most people have seen your research seminar. You could repeat a couple things, but you shouldn't be giving another research talk here, for example. So this is the one that's a little tricky, and that, like I said, the format varies and you really want to get some advice on before you go into it. Part of this visit then, as I say there in the fourth bullet, is to show that you'd be an interesting, congenial colleague. We're saying, how's this person going to join us and what is this person going to bring? And so realize that all these pieces of this visit are all around getting an understanding of that and understanding what you would bring and how you would be part of our community ultimately if we make an offer to you. So for me, the chalk talk is really a very, very important piece of it. And it gives us a sense a little bit again of teaching as well, how you interact, how you work with questions, how well you answer questions. And then this chalk talk also should have some information on teaching. So again, here we're looking generally around the types of classes you want to teach and maybe proposals for classes, and also again how you fit in the required curriculum for those of us departments that have an undergraduate major. So and then the other thing we're trying to understand in this chalk talk is how you're going to differentiate yourself from the labs you come from. So, what are you going to look like? What do you envision yourself looking like for when you come up for tenure in 5 years? And how are you going to be different from your mentors? And so those are all questions that are going to come up in a chalk talk generally. And then another thing that we're thinking about is, what's your lab going to look like? So what types of students do you need? How much space? Are there specific, again, shared facilities you need, certain equipment? So these are all things that are addressed as part of this chalk talk. So it's a bit of an ambitious package, but it's definitely a successful chalk talk can really, get you a job and can really make a huge difference. And so spending some time and understanding what the format is, who's going to be there, and the expectations for it, I think is quite important, which is why I'm spending so much time on it myself right now. So, and then as I already said, the social gatherings are on the clock, and realize that you're still being evaluated, still an interview, and sometimes people seem to forget that actually. Now, this is what an on-campus visit used to look like. So now an on-campus visit is no longer on campus, it's virtual. And in my experience this past spring, these virtual visits still are the same 1 to 2 day format. They still include a research seminar, they still include a chalk talk. However, the social gatherings are not there for understandable reasons. And so the dynamic is a little bit different. So I put together just a couple points on what to do for this virtual visit. So you can only control part of it. It's different now. So still dress up, still look, don't many of us sit on Skype in our jeans and t-shirts nowadays, or on Zoom, sorry. So I would very much recommend still dressing the part. Make sure that your technology works and that you've tested Zoom, that your slides project right, that you know which mode you're in, all these kind of things. And also think about where you're sitting and your virtual identity you're projecting. I'm showing you my room right now because I've been having bandwidth issues today, but ideally you might want to put on a background image that's a little more professional than what I have behind me. So think about your setting. It's weird to meet with someone when their lighting is dark and you can't see their face. And so thinking about what the background is like, make sure that you're comfortable. You're going to be sitting for a while on that screen. So all those things. And then also think about your body language and eye contact. As one example, I have 2 monitors. And so I'm talking to one screen where my camera is. If I were to look at my other monitor, you would have no eye contact. And so think about all those things in advance, and also eliminate distractions, to make sure that you're not going to have in the middle of a seminar something happen that you don't want to have happen. So this might be a time to not have your cat in the room when you're giving your chalk talk, but when you're doing one-on-one meetings, maybe it's okay. So think about all those things because you can control a lot of this environment piece on the virtual thing. What's a little bit harder, but that's normally very much a big part of the on-campus visit, is the considerations around the culture of the department. And so it's a little bit harder to get a sense of that virtually. The junior faculty morale, I think, is a very important thing to also think about. And then also all the work-life considerations. And so I don't have great advice, and I can take some questions on that, but these are things that are a little bit harder to get in the virtual world right now. And so coming up with ways for you to get at that, because these are very personal things also in terms of what you're looking for. Just want to say a little bit about the second visit. This usually occurs after we've had a round of interviews. We've gone through, we've selected who's going to get the offer. You've been maybe verbally told you've had the offer, and so you're going to get the offer. In some cases, you may already have the offer in writing, but now you plan a second visit. Again, some of these now are not happening because they're virtual, but if they're able to happen, this is usually you're the finalist at this point. So you've been told you're going to get an offer, you have the offer, your family may want to come on this visit, and you need to really think about what is it that you need to know in order to accept this offer. So the department is now in full recruiting mode, and you need to think, what is it that I need? So think about who your collaborators are. You should be seeing lab space, and then you should be seeing the local area. So that now real estate agents are doing that virtually. So you can sort of visit houses for sale. You need to think about the school districts. You need to think about all these other intangibles. Maybe what are your hobbies that you need to do? So do you have specific things that keep you sane, and how do you do them in this new environment? So those are all things to think about for the second visit, which is really around helping you decide if this is the right place for you to go to. I'm not going to go into this, but there's a lot of things to think about negotiating the offer. And actually, several years ago, I did a webinar together with Hank Donahue for the ORS that actually spent more time on this. So I would recommend actually going back and looking at that. But there's a whole bunch of things to think about now when you negotiate the offer, and they're way more than I can do justice to now. So I'm just putting them up for a second here, but there's a lot to think about, and that's a separate topic, I think, as well. And I just want to end with, these are some of the resources. I'm showing Cornell things just because this is where I went to for some of the things in this talk, but there's lots of information on the web about these things. And I'm happy to take questions after Xiaolong's talk here next. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vandermeulen. This information are really useful. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Xiaolong Wu. I'm a new assistant professor in the Department of Orthopaedics at the University of Rochester. And I'm really new. I actually just started my position this past September. So I really appreciate ORS giving me this opportunity to share my experience during this faculty job search. I also would like to mention this is really n equal to 1 sample size because I believe everyone will have their own unique experience. But I also hope my experience I shared here will be helpful for you. So before I start, I would like to give a really quick background about me. So I came from Taiwan, so I'm actually an international scholar. And my major was in material science and engineering. And I had 2 master's degrees. One is material science from National Taiwan University. The other one is biomedical engineering from Duke University. I also got my PhD in BME at Duke in 2015. And then I did 4-year postdoctoral training and 1 year as a research instructor. So about my doctoral research, so basically I was trained in Dr. Fosh Gilak's lab in orthopedic surgery department at Duke. And my major research is actually to investigate the effect of obesity on the development of osteoarthritis and the stem cell function. So a lot of these are were actually animal models. So overall, I have 9 publications and 2 book chapters. And these are a few selected awards. And again, really appreciate ORS award me NIRA, which is really, really important, essential award I have on my resume in 2014. So in terms of my postdoctoral research, I stay in Dr. Gilak's lab, but at this time our lab moved to Washington University in St. Louis. And I also completely switched my research direction. So this time I'm more focused on human-induced pluripotent stem cells and the application of next-generation sequencing. So my seminar talks actually on how I map gene regulatory network of iPSC chondrogenesis. Overall, I have 12 publications during the postdoctoral training and 1 patent, which is pending now. And I was awarded NIRA again by the ORS. And fortunately, I also really lucky had a K99. But I would like to mention that a lot of people ask me, is K99 required in terms of obtain a faculty position? The short answer is definitely no, it's not required. And we will discuss this in detail later on. But one essential thing I had is I really had a very generous and supportive mentor, Dr. Gilak, and really learned from the best over the 12 years. So look at my background. I actually had 2 directions I can apply to. One is biomedical engineering, which is a School of Engineering, and the other one is orthopedics, which is in School of Medicine. And both of them, I applied it to the tenure track. One thing, the two different department is, as we know, BME is very teaching intensive, and is also important for the tenure consideration. From what I learned, you are required to teach 2 courses per year, and you probably need to develop your own course based on your expertise. But this may vary, depends on the schools you apply to. And in terms of tenure policy, you might need at least 1 R1 or 1 NSF career award. But again, this can vary. So it's important to communicate well with the chair. So overall, I applied it to 32 schools, including a few stem cell programs for the BME department. And that's a lot of school. The reason I applied so many here, because I had advice from junior faculty members. From what they told me, the successful rate is not high. And so basically they applied 40, the highest number I heard is actually 60 schools. So that's why I really cast a wide net here. And we can talk about this in detail later as well. In terms of orthopedics, we know this is more research intensive, and there's less teaching requirement. And normally you require at least 2 R1s for tenure. But again, this can vary, depends on the school. So I applied it 12 schools. So the application cycle normally look like this. So the entire application package normally due around September to January next year. And then you probably start to receive the first Skype interview about December or February. And then on-site interview, which is on campus interview around February to April. And then eventually, you will probably have negotiation offers around March and May. So in terms of job advertisement, I receive a lot of information from my senior faculty members, but you can also find this information from ORS, ORC, and the BMES Career Center, Science Journal Careers, their website, and even Google Careers. They all had a very useful information there. So let's talk about the package. And again, this is really department dependent. For BME, Dr. Vandermeulen mentioned you need a cover letter, just tell the department the position you are interested, you're applying to, and your resume. In terms of resume, actually, some of the school require me just send them highlighted just 1-page CV, and some of them require NIH biosketch, so it varies too. And the state of research. So I talk about my research program. I also mentioned 2 to 3 independent research proposals, including potential funding mechanisms. And the length of the statement varies a lot. So some of them 2 pages only, some of them you can have 5 pages. So you need to really tailor, depends on the department the school you apply to. And the teaching statement, I talk about my mentoring and the teaching experience and what courses I can teach, and what new course I would like to develop when I've been hired. And it's about 1 to 2 pages long. These the statement, diversity statement, I talk about my outreach experience and how I'm going to improve diversity and the inclusion, not only in my lab, but also campus-wide. And I would like to echo Dr. Vandermeulen about this, because the feasibility is really important. You don't want to propose something that is really impossible in the department or the schools you would like to apply to. Some of the schools also ask me for the personal statement. It depends. And normally you want to send out 3 to 5 recommendation letters. And for the orthopedics, it's more straightforward. So you want a cover letter, resume, and a statement of research, and again, recommendation letters. So let's talk about the first phase, which is phone or Skype interview. So the duration for me is about 30 to 60 minutes. And 4 to 6 searching committee members. So during this interview, I introduce myself and my future research program and how my expertise will contribute to the department. And the committee may also ask you some research questions. And again, you want to prepare some questions for them as well. So my strategy to tackle this interview, because this is actually your first impression. So I actually went to their website and I created a really short profile. I look at each faculty members and copy their photos. You can put photos of them together, and especially their expertise. I think the key is also you want to find you want to engage in the discussion, because you want to think about whether there's a potential synergy between you and the department you would like to work for in the future. So also another advice I would like to give is at this stage, just talk about research, show your passion. No question about salary, tenure policy, and the startup fund yet. Remember to send out a thank you note after the interview. For the second phase, which is we call on-site interview, on the normal time before pandemic is for me is 2 nights, 1 full day. People is about 10 to 11 faculty members, including the chair and the dean of the school. Each faculty member will be 30 to 45 minutes. So it's a really long day. And you might have lunch with students or postdoctors and a dinner with professors. And chalk talk normally happens in the morning. It's about 1.5 to 2 hour long, and mostly with searching committees. And the style actually varies a lot. Some of the schools allow you to use PowerPoint slides, but only a few slides, like 5 slides or something, not a lot. Or some of them just require you to really write from the scratch on the whiteboard. So the way I talk about chalk talks, I mentioned my research program, but now this time is a little bit more detailed, 2 independent research proposals. One is short-term, one is long-term. And I also mentioned my potential funding mechanisms. In terms of seminar talk, normally happens around lunchtime. And as Dr. Vandervillen mentioned before, it's about 45 to 50 minutes long and open to audience. So this is including professors and the students. It could from different department too. So with these, like if we are in the ortho department, people probably know musculoskeletal system pretty well. But if you are going to the BME to give this kind of talk, you want to think about your background slides. So people will be able, from a different background, will be able to understand your research. So my strategy to tackle on-site interviews specifically for chalk talk is really practice with your advisor and lab members. My lab members in GILAC lab really helped me to prepare this chalk talk well. Again, during this visit, I only talk about research and no question about salary and the startup fund. But you can go deeper, a little bit deeper layer to ask questions like if there's any departmental support for the students, such as tuition or travel support. So the third phase is about offer and the negotiation. So when will you know the results? It varies again. Some of the schools actually right away after my on-site interview just tell me yes or no. And then some of them actually have to wait a month later. And the offer content, you expect to see the salary, startup package, lab and office space, official start date, and your responsibility, and how the department is going to evaluate you. And the relocation compensation, and is there a second visit for house hunting or sign up bonus, things like that. And this is really time to ask about tenure policy within the department. I think this is really important. So I'm going to focus a few items here. First of all is salary. So salary, again, split into BME and ortho. For BME, from what I learned, is about $100K for 9 months, guaranteed, supported by the department. And the 3 months, particularly in the summertime, you should support it from your own grants. But 100% will be supported by the department for the first year. But again, please, this can vary a lot because by the school, but this is what I had from my experience. So if you recalculate this is really a 12-month salary for $133K. For the ortho department, salary is a larger range. So it's about 100 plus minus 15K for 12 months. And mostly you should cover this from your own grants. 100% will be supported by the department, especially within the first 3 years of your appointment. But after that, the department will expect you cover at least 50% of your salary from your own grants. So there's a huge difference compared to the BME and the ortho salary. And if we look at the startup package, BME is about, for me, is about 800K. Startup package is pretty consistent. For the ortho, again, vary a lot. So it's 750K to I think I need to move. So it's 750K to $1 million startup package. And then a few caveats here, because a lot of departments actually include your salary support in the startup package. So you might need to recalculate a little bit so you would know what is the true amount you can use for your research. And a few questions you need to figure out to clarify is how will the startup package be provided? Is a total lump sum or is a fixed amount per year? And whether this startup package can be carried on, because some of the departments, some of the schools actually require you to spend this package within a certain year. So let's talk about my results. So for the BME, I applied to 32 schools. I had 5 interviews, 4 on-site, but I only had 2 offers of these 32 schools. For ortho, the successful rate is a little bit higher. So it's about, I had 3 offers, so it's a quarter. So as you can see, the successful rate is not very high. And this is also the reason I'm glad I cast a really wide net. And a few thoughts about this is really, I think you probably want to apply broadly. Not just apply to top schools, because the department, they are also looking for their own, the best fit for them. They have their own direction they want to grow in the future. And another thing I would like to mention is K award is definitely not necessary in terms of getting a faculty job, because a lot of offers I didn't get, they actually offer to the candidates that they actually don't have K awards. So. And another example is I find this, in 2018 to 2019, there are actually 61 new faculty members in the life science at 21 R1 universities, and only 16% of them have K awards. So this is just another evidence showing that K award is helpful. It helps you open some doors, but definitely not all doors. Because again, I don't get discouraged because. And don't take it personal, because like I mentioned before, department, they have their own like specific area they would like to grow. So they are looking for the best fit. And during the interview, be yourself and show your passion in the research. When you interview, just keep in mind that you always meet some people who are really interested in your research, but there are also some people who aren't. So with this in your mind, you actually feel more comfortable when you convey your message. And another advice is really to seek advice. And I had a lot of good advice from senior and junior faculty members. If you have friends recently obtained faculty position, that could be a really useful resource as well. And I listed some website I used during my faculty search. And again, this will be posted. And with this, I would like to thank my mentor, Dr. Gilak, and also a lot of mentors along my long training. Without their help, I won't make this happen. It won't make this happen. As well as Gilak lab members, and as well as my family, my furry kids, and then my lovely wife. Finally, this is our funding support. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any question.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Vandermeulen and Dr. Wu, for sharing your experiences. So this is probably more for Dr. Vandermeulen. So how do teaching-focused academic positions, which are fewer and farther in between, work? So are they usually filled by internal candidates, or are they advertised more broadly?
I'm going to ask for clarification. Do you know do you mean sort of universities that are teaching focused on non-R1 teaching positions, or is the question around lecture? So at a place like Cornell, which is a research institution, but the lecturer type positions that we have. So there's 2 categories there. So I'd say schools that are primarily undergrad focused institutions hire probably through a similar process, with the exception that the research chalk talk wouldn't be required. And in some places do this regardless, but sometimes you have to actually do a sample lecture. And so they may ask you to, instead of a chalk talk on research, you may be asked to give a teaching demo, so to speak. And in some cases, they actually have you do it in an actual class. And you can also be asked to teach an artificial lecture, or you could be asked to do a real lecture, in fact. So and some places do that as part of the interview process as well. And that's different from, at Cornell, we also hire teaching focused faculty. So I hired a lecturer position last year. And so we did do something similar. We actually had a teaching vision talk instead of a research vision talk for those individuals. And they weren't asked to give a research seminar, but we had them talk about their teaching philosophy and their teaching experience in an equivalent to a chalk talk. So in our case, that chalk talk is with the full faculty, and they went through their teaching experience, their philosophy, their pedagogy, how they help students learn. And they actually had been very focused as graduate students and postdocs, some of our candidates, on that process, and had done certificates, for example, at your local Center for Teaching and Learning, which most institutions have. And so, that you can develop your own pedagogy there and talk about your experiences as part of the interview process. I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, to clarify, the question was about R1 institutions and in general lectureship. So
that's the lecture as I just described.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question that was sent anonymously. And this is with respect to Xiaolong's list of publications that he had from grad school and undergrad. And the question is, are these publication counts typical, or is this person particularly outstanding candidate? So if you have a person who has, let's say, 2 to 3 publications from grad school and another 1 to 2 from postdoc, is it worth them applying, or are they going to be hopelessly outmatched by someone like Xiaolong?
Oh, no, definitely not hopeless. So my situation is a little bit unique because Dr. Gidak that moved from Duke to WashU. So we basically set up the lab over there. So I was a kind of senior postdoctor there, so helped set up the lab. So I was put on a lot of early projects. So that's why I have so many publications. But I think the key is you want to show the department you have 1 or 2 at least, your first other publication, show you will be able to lead a project. And you want to show at least 1 or 2, co-author publication to show the department in the chair that you were able to work with other people. I think that's an important message. You don't need I don't think you really need a nature science or this kind of publication. It's very difficult. Really depends on our field too. So.
Okay, so we have another question. And so this is from Kelsey Collins, and this is for Dr. Vandermeulen. So Dr. Vandermeulen, in your opinion, what is the most underutilized opportunity in the application for a candidate to stand out to the hiring committee for positive reasons in the hiring process?
Single opportunity. I view these as a package. And so the package, we're looking at the whole. So I think you want a self-consistent package. So for example, your cover letter should match, which can be somewhat of an executive summary of everything you've done, should match what the other statements are, pick up on the highlights of it. I think having letter writers that are informed and know something about the direction you want to go. Often you're merging your postdoc experience with your PhD experience because you're trying to differentiate yourself from your postdoc lab, right? And so you're most likely to be, what you propose is most likely to be similar research-wise to your postdoc position. And so, but you want to differentiate yourself. So often having the letter writers, especially your postdoc mentor, understand a little bit about that so that it's really, the whole thing looks like a whole in a package to me is a key. I don't think one of those pieces necessarily elevates you above everything. So I guess I still think we look at the whole thing, I would say. And so I don't know that I can identify just a single thing to elevate, but I think those various pieces, and again, that there's a package and a story there is important. And also, I'm curious actually in Xiaolong's case, if whether the places, he said, apply broadly, but the places where he got the offers, whether you could have predicted up front how likely he was to match those, so to speak, because I do think we see in ads that are looking at specific areas, we sometimes see people from very far afield, but we also sometimes go far afield in those searches actually. So I do think those are broadly defined, but we don't go so far that we're going totally out of certain areas. And sometimes, we see a lot of applicants that really don't match even biomedical engineering sometimes. And so that's quite surprising to me. How far some of those stretches are that people are thinking. But I don't think there's only a single component, to put it that way. Sorry, long answer to say that.
So to piggyback off of that statement, so I was wondering, should you even apply if you don't fit that specific research focus in the call? Because especially for you, Xiaolong, if you applied to 32 positions in BME, I can't imagine every single position was, for single cell sequencing.
Right. So for me, actually, a lot of schools, they, like Dr. Vandermeulen mentioned, they might mention specific area they are interested in. But some schools, like mentioned, actually, we are hiring biomaterials, teaching engineering. But the teaching engineering itself could be very broad, right? Neural teaching engineering, right? Musculoskeletal system, tissue engineering. So it's very broad. That's why I cast wide net. Another thing I would like to kind of chime in with Dr. Vandermeulen's message earlier is in all the interviews, I definitely got question is, how are you going to differentiate yourself from your PI? So in your research program, you really want to think about what's the difference, even in the same topic, what's the difference between your research and your mentor's research? You want to tell them you will be able to do independent research in the future.
Great. So we have another question, which is about the K-99 application. So what is the best time, or what year of your postdoc is the best time to apply for a K-99? And then what are the most important criteria for the application on which you will be judged?
In terms of K-99, I think one important criteria is you want to have at least one first author publication, at least in your postdoctoral research. Once you have that secured, and then over the time, I was thinking about the potential project I can have. And then you want to discuss this with your mentor along the way. My situation is a little bit different because K-99, I'm a foreigner scholar, so K-99 is actually the only source I can apply to. So a lot of candidates, they actually have F-32. I think that's a very helpful grant you should apply to. So basically, you want to show the committee, I think the K-99, the funding is not the key. I think the key is to show them you have experience in terms of writing grants. And with that, you have that training. I think that's important. You'll be able to secure a grant in the future.
Oh, so I just wanted to mention also with the K-99, in terms of the timing, you just have to make sure that you submit it early enough so that you're able to resubmit once before the deadline, which is about 4 years after your last degree is awarded. But currently, because of the pandemic, they're extending that deadlines to 2 cycles past your last cycle. So we'll have a bit more time now, but you definitely want to make sure you time it correctly. And also new parents can get a full year extension.
And along with that, I think it might be worth to check different institutions, like even NIH, right, have different like NIAMS, like DDKAs or whatever. So you want to make sure they might have their own definition in terms of what is the time frame you can apply to K-99.
So I have a question, I guess primarily for Mario-Elaine, and it's about faculty searches with a specific focus. So when you have a specific focus, I guess, how close do you want a candidate's research to be to that focus? And if you have candidates that are not in that area, is it worth applying to those jobs or not?
I think it is worth applying within reason, I guess. So again, we always see it used to be more than it is nowadays, actually, but we used to always see candidates that almost had no relationship to, and I saw this both when I was in mechanical engineering, mechanical and aerospace, and in biomedical. I've seen it also that really don't in any way, don't have any overlap. And there's people that are just applying to every search out there. I just don't think that's appropriate. I think as Xiao Long said, right, tissue engineering is a very broad term in the biomedical engineering space, the bioengineering space. And so there's many, and people have many different definitions of that, both at the sort of molecular level, the cellular level, the tissue level, right? And so I think there's a lot of space to fit within that. And so, and also if a department lists multiple areas, that's already, we on our last ad last year had 3 different areas listed, I think. And so that's already a sign that there's wiggle room, so to speak, right? But if it's a narrowly, these ads differ. So if it's a very specifically worded ad, then that gives some message about what they're looking for, in fact. And again, when they have multiple areas, you think, okay, there's room there. And we all are looking kind of for the best. I hate using the word fit because it's very subjective, but we're looking for a candidate that will work well institutionally. And so we've sometimes gone into a search with thinking very much that we're going to go in one direction, but listed multiple areas, and then ended up going in very much in one of the other areas. And so it's very hard to predict. My PhD advisor many years ago said, a search takes on a life of its own, and that was sort of seemed weird. But now, once you've been on the other side, it definitely is true that searches sometimes take legs in directions that you really didn't expect because of a person that comes in and is just so passionate, and you just think, wow, like I want to bring this person here, and sometimes that person isn't in what you thought, but you're just so taken by the candidate, right? I mean, there's a personal dynamics in these situations, and so. I would apply, but I don't think you need to have 100% fit at all. But I also think if you're around 0% fit, you should be making sure you have places where you have better fit, because I think that may be unlikely then.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask one more question. This is from Evan Buttman at VCU. So he asked, when is the best time to approach the job market in your postdoctoral career? Since hiring is cyclic, is it detrimental to apply early or across multiple hiring cycles?
Absolutely not, and definitely yes. I mean, there's definitely people that go multiple cycles. You learn from your first cycle, and there's also people that get jobs on the early cycle when they didn't expect to get one. So, and sometimes that one year makes a huge difference in what you look like as a candidate, right? So you go early, and then in between you get a big grant or you get a major paper out, and then the next year you're totally different. And also there's different departments the next year as well, different institutions, right? So I don't see a big problem with that.
Great. Well, I think that we are out of time. So thank you everyone for your interest and for sticking around. If you have questions that were not answered, feel free to reach out to me or to Fanny or potentially even to our speakers. We'd be happy to contact you or to talk to you about those later. So thank you again for attending this virtual career development session.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, everyone.